The Dathomir witches, also known as the Witches of Dathomir, are a group of force-sensitive beings who hail from the harsh, remote planet of Dathomir. The witches are unique in the Star Wars galaxy due to their distinct connection to the Force, which is different from that of the Jedi and the Sith. Their origins date back thousands of years, and their power is deeply tied to the dark side of the Force, though not in the traditional way that the Sith embrace it. The planet Dathomir itself is a place of mystery and danger, populated by vicious creatures and surrounded by thick, oppressive jungle. The planet is home to ancient, powerful energies that have shaped the Dathomir witches and their practices. The witches' connection to the dark side is not defined by dominance or control over others, as with the Sith, but rather by intuition, emotion, and instinct. The Dathomir witches, over time, would develop a unique Force tradition, one that balances both power and mystery, often making their practices seem almost shamanistic. What set the witches apart from the Sith and Jedi was their use of natural elements to channel the Force. Their powers were drawn from the land, the creatures, and their deep understanding of nature's rhythms. They wielded their abilities with a blend of spirituality and pragmatism, using the Force not for domination, but for survival and balance with the harsh realities of Dathomir. They did not align with the traditional Jedi or Sith philosophies, creating a unique and independent path within the Force. 2. The Matriarchal Society and the Sisters of Dathomir. A distinctive feature of the Dathomir witches was their matriarchal society. Dathomir was a society where women held the power, ruling the planet's clans and establishing an order built on strength, respect, and survival. This matriarchal structure was fundamental to the witches' approach to the Force. Unlike the Sith, who often operated on the rule of two master and apprentice, or the Jedi, who had a more institutionalized approach, the witches of Dathomir worked in clans and sisterhoods. These clans were made up of powerful women, with each sister holding unique abilities, but all united by their knowledge of the Force and their traditions. The Sisters of Dathomir were the most notable of these clans, and they carried the legacy of their world's power. The witches could control creatures and nature itself with their magical abilities, blending the Force with elements of the natural world to manipulate living beings and the environment around them. Their magical traditions were also tied to the spirit world, with some witches even claiming to communicate with the spirits of the dead to guide their actions. This combination of Force power and spiritual connection made the Dathomir witches a truly unique presence in the galaxy. The most famous among the Dathomir witches were the Night Sisters, coven of witches who were skilled in the use of the dark side. The Night Sisters were known for their ritual magic, which they used to summon spirits, create powerful spells, and even control the minds of others. Their primary leader, Mother Talzin, was one of the most powerful and influential witches in history. She wielded the power of the dark side in ways that challenged the Sith Lords, making her one of the most formidable enemies the galaxy had ever known. 3. The Force magic of the Dathomir witches. The power of the Dathomir witches was unique because it was rooted not just in the traditional use of the Force, but in their ritualistic practices. They blended the physical, the spiritual, and the Force to craft a form of magic that was distinctly their own. The magic used by the Dathomir witches was often tied to the elements, life forces, and spirits, allowing them to perform incredible feats of power without needing the formal structures of the Sith or Jedi traditions. The Force lightning and other traditional dark side powers were used by the witches, but their practices went much deeper. The witches had the ability to create zombified warriors, enchantments, and control minds, powers that relied on their deep understanding of the galaxy's natural energies. They could create bonds with creatures and even people, manipulating them for specific goals. Unlike the Sith, who used the dark side for domination and power, the Dathomir witches used their powers more instinctively, driven by their emotions, rather than a desire for conquest. One of the most unique powers of the Dathomir witches was the ability to summon and control the Rancor, a terrifying creature native to their planet. The Rancors were viewed by the witches as extensions of their power. These massive beasts were often used as tools in combat, carrying out the witch's will with terrifying efficiency. The ability to control such creatures, while also using the dark side, symbolized the witch's deep connection to the living forces of nature and the spiritual realm. 4. The role of Dathomir in the larger Star Wars lore. While the Dathomir witches were a secretive and insular group, they played a significant role in the galaxy's larger history. Their history was intertwined with the Jedi and the Sith, particularly during the Clone Wars. In the Star Wars universe, the witches of Dathomir often found themselves at odds with the Sith, particularly in their conflict with Darth Sidious. However, the witches also served as an alternative path to power, drawing away from the politics and structure of the galaxy's major powers. The most notable connection to the larger Star Wars lore comes from the conflict with the Sith, particularly with Darth Maul, a former Sith apprentice who was eventually exiled to Dathomir after his defeat by Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Night Sisters, led by Mother Talzin, played a significant role in Maul's return to power after his near death at the hands of Obi-Wan. They empowered him with new legs and the will to seek vengeance on the Sith. His time on Dathomir greatly impacted his evolution, making him more dangerous and driven by a renewed sense of purpose. However, this connection to the Dathomir witches ultimately led to his downfall, as their power and influence were far more nuanced than just raw rage and vengeance. The witches' influence can also be seen in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, where the Night Sisters were central to several key battles during the Clone Wars, including their manipulation of Asajj Ventress, a former Sith apprentice, and their confrontation with General Grievous. Their magical powers and ability to manipulate the Force, combined with their understanding of political and emotional manipulation, made them formidable foes for both the Jedi and the Sith. 5. The true power of the Dathomir witches. More than just dark side sorcery. The true power of the Dathomir witches lies in their ability to manipulate the Force in ways that others could not. While the Sith focused on power through fear and anger, and the Jedi emphasized peace and discipline, the Dathomir witches tapped into something far older and more primal. Their connection to nature, spirituality, and emotion made them unpredictable and dangerous, but also enigmatic and deeply powerful. What makes their power unique is their emotional connection to the Force. Unlike the Jedi, who suppress their emotions in order to maintain peace, and the Sith, who give in to their emotions for power, the Dathomir witches embrace their emotions as part of their strength. Their ability to use passion, instinct, and ritual magic gives them a unique form of control over the Force, one that transcends traditional understandings of light and dark. Moreover, the witches' deep connection to nature and their spiritual practices makes their magic seem almost like a form of shamanism, a way to tap into the very essence of the galaxy's living energy. Their powers were not just for combat or conquest, they were also tools for healing, communication, and maintaining the balance of life on Dathomir. The Dathomir witches were more than just sorcerers of the dark side. They were guardians of nature and life, who used their Force abilities in harmony with the living world around them. 6. The Dathomir witches in the new canon. influence beyond the Clone Wars. Though their story began long before the Clone Wars, the Dathomir witches continue to have a lasting impact on the galaxy, especially in the new canon. Their culture, their philosophies, and their unique approach to the Force offer an alternative to the traditional Jedi-Sith dichotomy. With their mixture of spirituality, intuitive power, and dark side influence, they continue to serve as a counterpoint to the forces of order and chaos in the galaxy. Their continued presence in Star Wars media, from the Clone Wars animated series to the novel Darth Maul, son of Dathomir, shows that the Dathomir witches are far from just an ancient curiosity. They are a living, breathing force within the galaxy, offering new possibilities for Force users who reject the confines of Jedi and Sith teachings. 1. The Dathomir witches and their relationship with the Sith. While the Dathomir witches possess a deep connection to the dark side, their relationship with the Sith is not straightforward. The Sith, as practitioners of a specific form of the dark side, view their mastery of the Force as a path toward absolute domination. The Dathomir witches, on the other hand, operate in a more nuanced, independent way, utilizing the dark side not necessarily for control but as a tool for balance, survival, and personal power. Though the Night Sisters, the most infamous faction of Dathomir witches, were aligned with the dark side, they did not adhere strictly to the Sith code or the rule of two. Instead, they relied on natural magic, rituals, and the Force to maintain their power over their environment and the galaxy at large. For much of their history, the Sith and the Dathomir witches existed parallel to each other, one focused on total domination and the other on a more personal form of empowerment. However, the Night Sisters' conflict with the Sith, particularly during the time of Darth Maul, showcases the tension between the two forces. Mother Talzin, the leader of the Night Sisters, was a powerful dark side sorceress who, though aligned with the dark side, had her own goals that sometimes clashed with the Sith. She sought to manipulate her power for her own survival and vengeance, often defying the Sith Lord's authority. The Dathomir witches also faced the wrath of the Sith when Darth Sidious and Darth Maul sought to destroy them. Sidious saw them as a threat to his own power and influence, as their power to control others and use the dark side in ways the Sith could not predict made them dangerous. The assassination of Mother Talzin and the near extinction of the Night Sisters under Maul's orders demonstrated the Sith's ruthless tendency to eliminate rivals who posed a challenge to their monopoly over the Force. Despite the clash between the Sith and the Dathomir witches, there is a certain symmetry between them. Both operate in the realms of darkness and manipulation, but differ significantly in their goals and philosophies. While the Sith seek power for control, the witches seek to understand, balance, and occasionally manipulate the dark forces of nature for their own use. 2. The Dathomir witches and the Jedi. Philosophical divergence. The Dathomir witches' interactions with the Jedi Order were limited, but their presence in the galaxy posed a fundamental challenge to the Jedi's view of the Force. Jedi teachings emphasize selflessness, discipline, and control over emotions, with an emphasis on harmony between the Force's light and dark aspects. The Dathomir witches, in contrast, viewed the dark side as a natural, accessible source of power, not something to be feared or repressed. While the Jedi sought to live in balance with their emotions, the witches channeled their emotions and passions into their power, reflecting the Jedi's fear of the dark side and their rejection of it. The Jedi and the witches, then, represent two very different approaches to understanding the Force. The Jedi, having embraced the light side to maintain peace and order, see emotions such as anger and fear as dangerous, believing that they lead to the corruption of the soul. The witches, however, believe in the empowerment of emotions, seeing anger and rage as forces that can be used as tools for personal growth and survival. Their matriarchal society allows them to wield power with purpose, often leading to a different relationship with the galaxy's broader conflicts compared to the Jedi. While there was never direct confrontation between the Jedi Order and the Dathomir witches, there were moments of tension, especially when the Night Sisters were involved in galactic events. The Jedi's strict codes of conduct sometimes found it difficult to understand the witches' freer, more instinctive use of the dark side. This cultural and philosophical divide underscores the mystery surrounding the witches and their place within the greater galaxy. They didn't simply fit into the neat confines of the light or dark sides, representing a more holistic yet dangerous approach to the Force. 3. The Dathomir witches' survival after the Clone Wars. The aftermath of the Clone Wars marked a dark period for the Dathomir witches, particularly the Night Sisters. With the rise of Emperor Palpatine and the Sith, the witches' independence was severely threatened. Darth Sidious's purges, along with the rise of Sith-controlled empires, led to the near extinction of the Dathomir witches as an organized force. Mother Talzin's death and the subsequent fall of the Night Sisters, as seen in Star Wars, The Clone Wars, left the witches in disarray. However, the legacy of the Dathomir witches was not lost. Even after the fall of the Night Sisters, their magic continued to influence later events. Asajj Ventress, who was once an apprentice of Count Dooku, became involved with the Dathomir witches after her betrayal by the Sith. Ventress found herself in Dathomir after being left for dead, and there she became intertwined with the Night Sisters' magic, gaining powerful skills that enhanced her combat abilities. Despite their near extinction, the Dathomir witches' magic and traditions lived on through characters like Ventress, who was able to tap into their power and use it to fight for her own survival. Maul, another survivor from the era of the Sith, also drew on the witches' magic, utilizing Dathomir's dark energies for his personal vendetta against both the Sith and the Jedi. This ability to adapt and survive, even in the face of galactic chaos, speaks to the enduring power of the Dathomir witches. Though they may have been scattered and weakened by the events of the Clone Wars, their legacy as powerful users of the dark side and their intricate connection to the natural world cannot be erased. Even in exile, the influence of the witches persists, proving their lasting strength. 4. The Dathomir witches in new canon. Influence beyond the Clone Wars. In the new canon, the Dathomir witches continue to have an impact on the broader Star Wars galaxy. The Star Wars Rebels series briefly touches upon the lingering influence of Dathomir, as Maul continues to play a significant role in galactic events. Maul's time on Dathomir, where he was empowered by the witch's magic, profoundly shapes his character, making him one of the most dangerous figures in the galaxy. Furthermore, the novel Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir, explores Maul's ties to Dathomir, showing how he continued to use their magic after his fall from grace with the Sith. The novel also introduces a clash between Maul and the Sith, which once again highlights the tension between the witches' alternative use of the dark side and the Sith's strict doctrine of control and domination. The presence of the witches' influence is felt even in the post-Empire era, where characters like Rey and Kylo Ren continue to struggle with their own connections to the dark side. While Rey rejects the dark side and Kylo Ren embraces it, the witch's legacy lives on as an inspiration for those who would wield the Force in unconventional ways. 5. The true power of the Dathomir witches. A unique Force tradition. Ultimately, the true power of the Dathomir witches lies not only in their use of the dark side, but in their unique philosophy and their connection to the natural world. They harness the Force in ways that the Jedi and Sith do not, drawing on their deep spiritual connection to the land, the elements, and their ancestral power. Their magic is not solely destructive or domineering. It is both defensive and adaptive, focused on survival, transformation, and at times, revenge. What makes the Dathomir witches truly powerful is their diverse and deeply rooted understanding of the Force. They used the dark side, but they did not allow it to completely corrupt their hearts. The strength of the witches lies in their balance. They were both guardians and wielders of the dark side, choosing to use it in ways that serve their survival rather than the destruction of others. Their connection to the natural world gives them a unique perspective on the Force, one that goes beyond the narrow dichotomy of light and dark. The true power of the Dathomir witches is their resilience and enduring influence, proving that even in the face of extinction, their power persists. Their legacy continues to shape the galaxy, whether through the actions of Maul, Ventress, or even the hidden influence on the First Order. The Dathomir witches' connection to the Force, rooted in the land and life, leaves a profound and lasting mark on the galaxy's history. 1. The influence of the Dathomir witches on Force-sensitive individuals. The Dathomir witches were not merely a group confined to their homeworld of Dathomir. Their magical powers, deeply tied to the Force, transcended their geographic isolation. In the broader Star Wars galaxy, their influence is felt through the Force-sensitive individuals they interacted with, whether through Maul, Ventress, or their connection to other mysterious Force users like Rey and Kylo Ren. The Night Sisters, in particular, had a lasting effect on several prominent characters. Asajj Ventress, a former Sith apprentice, was trained in the ways of the Dathomir witches after being left for dead by Count Dooku. Her time on Dathomir and with the witches marked a turning point in her life, where she gained new abilities and a stronger connection to the dark side. The Night Sisters empowered her with unique magic that made her even more dangerous in her pursuit of revenge, both on her former Sith master and on the galaxy at large. Through Darth Maul, another pivotal character, the Dathomir witches' influence continued to shape the larger galactic narrative. Maul, a former Sith Lord, was rescued by the Night Sisters after his defeat at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Under the guidance of Mother Talzin, Maul was physically rebuilt and spiritually renewed. Talzin imbued Maul with the magics of Dathomir, forging a new weapon out of his rage and hatred. The mystical bond between Maul and the witches allowed him to survive and redefine his goals in the galaxy, eventually leading him to become a bitter rival to both the Jedi and the Sith. While Maul initially sought to continue his dark path as an agent of vengeance, his encounter with the Dathomir witches altered the trajectory of his character. The witches instilled in him not only a sense of spiritual reawakening, but also a new understanding of power and control. In the process, Maul's character evolved into one driven by revenge and retribution. His journey shows the dynamic potential of the witches' power. They do not simply create obedient pawns, they shape independent and complex characters who are capable of altering their own destinies. 2. The Dathomir witches' influence in the shadow of the Jedi and Sith. The Dathomir witches' practices stand in stark contrast to both the Jedi and the Sith. While the Jedi maintain peace and order by rejecting the dark side, and the Sith use the dark side for domination and personal gain, the witches employ the dark side for personal power while maintaining a spiritual connection to nature, the land, and the life force. This contrast highlights a philosophical divide in the larger Force tradition. What makes the witches unique is that their power is rooted in nature, intuitive rituals, and ancestral knowledge, rather than in the purely intellectual and dogmatic teachings of the Jedi or the Sith. The witch's ritual magic often seems mystical, with its origins deeply tied to the planet Dathomir's dark energies and its connection to life forces. While the Jedi and Sith are often portrayed as opposites in their approach to the Force, the witches represent an intermediate path, where power is not about enforcing order or creating chaos, but rather about maintaining balance with the natural world. This connection to the land and the spiritual world was at odds with the Jedi and the Sith, and it often put the witches at the fringes of galactic conflicts. However, their actions in the Clone Wars and their influence on other Force users show how the dark side can manifest in more subtle, spiritual forms that do not fit into the larger binary of light and dark. The witches are a third path in the galaxy, one that doesn't strictly align with the Jedi's peacekeeping or the Sith's warlord mentality. Their use of the dark side was marked by their intuitive, grounded approach, power for empowerment, survival, and ritual, not domination. Their legacy continues to challenge the galaxy's duality of light and dark, presenting a richer, more diverse understanding of what it means to wield the Force. 3. The Dathomir Witches and the Rise of the First Order. Though the Dathomir witches themselves were largely wiped out after the Clone Wars, the influence of their magical practices reverberated through subsequent generations. The dark side's corruptive influence continued, even beyond the fall of the Sith, leading to the rise of the First Order, this new authoritarian regime based on the remnants of the Galactic Empire represents the same dark side influence that the Dathomir witches once wielded, though the First Order is more direct in its militaristic control and fear-driven tactics. The dark powers that fueled it were not so different from the primal magic of Dathomir. Kylo Ren, as the leader of the First Order, also represents an echo of the Dathomir witches' emotional conflict with the dark side. Kylo Ren's inherited legacy from Darth Vader, as well as his constant struggle between light and dark, mirrors the internal conflict that Dathomir witches often experienced. Though he was more directly aligned with the Sith and the Empire, his emotional instability and his desire to redefine his path resonate with the witches' own struggles to escape the domination of the Sith and the Jedi. 4. The continued relevance of the Dathomir witches in the post-Empire era. Even after the fall of the Empire and the end of the First Order, the dark side and its influence remain strong. The rise of new Force users, like Rey, who were attuned to both the light and dark aspects of the Force, echoes the witches' balanced use of the dark side. Rey's final battle with Emperor Palpatine shows how the dark side's power, which originated from figures like the Dathomir witches and the Sith, continues to exert control over those who are susceptible to its pull. Rey, like the witches, embraces both the light and dark, but unlike the Sith, she is not driven by fear or hate. Instead, she uses the Force for selfless purposes, resisting the temptation to use the dark side to seize power. Her acceptance of her ancestral connection to Palpatine is symbolic of the witches' own ability to confront their dark legacies and redefine their fates. Rey's ultimate choice to reject the dark side's power, despite her lineage, echoes the Dathomir witches' struggle to create their own destiny. The witches, much like Rey, were constantly faced with the temptation to wield the dark side for personal power or control. Rey's choice in the final moments of her confrontation with Palpatine is symbolic of the witches' enduring influence. They were a testament to the power of self-awareness, personal choice, and the ability to resist the temptations of the dark side. 5. The Dathomir witches' Sith true legacy, a reminder of balance and self-determination. The true power of the Dathomir witches was their deep connection to the Force, not as a tool for domination, but as a means of personal empowerment and balance with nature. They represented an ancient understanding of the Force that was based on instinct, emotion, and survival, offering a path to power that wasn't governed by fear or the need for control. In the end, the Dathomir witch's legacy is a powerful reminder that the dark side, though tempting, is ultimately a path of destruction. However, the witches also show that the Force's power is not defined by strict codes or dogmatic teachings. Their ability to balance both darkness and light, using their powers for survival and spiritual growth, offers a unique and often misunderstood view of the Force. While the witches' practices may have been deemed as dangerous or unorthodox by the Jedi and Sith, they provide a deeper understanding of the Force that can be applicable to those who walk the line between light and dark. 1. The Dathomir witches and their spiritual connection to the Force. What makes the Dathomir witches truly unique in the Star Wars galaxy is their spiritual connection to the Force, which is different from both the Jedi and Sith philosophies. The witches did not merely view the Force as a means to power or domination. For them, the Force was a sacred force of nature that tied them to their planet, Dathomir, and to the life forces around them. The Night Sisters, in particular, practiced ritualistic Force magic, which connected them not only to the dark side, but to a deeper understanding of the natural world. They believed that life force, spiritual energy, and their emotional states were all part of a grand tapestry that could be manipulated through the Force. This connection made their magic seem almost like shamanistic rituals, which they could channel in a way that was tied to the rhythms of nature. It wasn't about controlling the Force through sheer will or logic, as the Jedi did, nor was it about seeking domination, as the Sith did. It was about harmony with the universe, while still wielding the power to protect, avenge, or survive. Mother Talzin, the most powerful and iconic of the Dathomir witches, embodied this philosophy in its purest form. She was not just a practitioner of the dark side in the traditional Sith sense, but someone who used the Force as a tool of spiritual insight, communication with ancestors, and living in balance with the galaxy's natural energies. In her battles with both the Sith and the Jedi, she proved that the dark side could be used in many ways, whether for destruction, healing, or spiritual strength. Talzin's death at the hands of Darth Sidious marked a significant loss for the Dathomir witches, but her legacy and spiritual teachings lived on, both in the stories of the Dathomir people and in the resurgence of Maul and Saj Ventress. These survivors carried forward her lessons and showed how her influence would persist even after her physical death. Her spiritual connection to the Force was unlike that of the Jedi or the Sith, giving her power that transcended conventional limitations. 2. The role of the Dathomir witches in the era of the Galactic Empire. After the fall of the Jedi Order and the establishment of the Galactic Empire, the Dathomir witches were largely hidden from the galaxy's view. The Jedi and Sith were the primary figures in galactic politics, but the dark side's influence was still present in the form of other Force-sensitive individuals, especially the remnants of the Dathomirian legacy. One of the most compelling stories of Dathomir's influence during the Galactic Empire's rule is Maul's survival. After being defeated by Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Phantom Menace, Maul was left for dead, only to be rescued and rebuilt by the Night Sisters. Maul's survival and subsequent quest for vengeance made him one of the most dangerous figures in the galaxy. He spent years as a weapon of the Dathomir witches, using their teachings to regain his strength and become a threat not only to the Sith, but also to the larger galaxy. Through Maul's journey, we see how the Dathomir witch's power could transcend even the strict boundaries of the Sith Order. Though Maul was initially trained as a Sith, he adopted the Night Sisters' ritualistic dark side magic, which helped him not only survive, but also thrive. He would later lead the Shadow Collective and challenge both the Jedi and the Sith, all while carrying the magical knowledge of his Dathomirian upbringing. The Clone Wars and its aftermath brought the Dathomir witches into the larger conflict, as Mother Talzin's survival in the shadows remained a threat to the Sith. Even though the Empire had risen and the Sith had gained complete control, the witches' influence still resonated through their ties to the Force-sensitive outcasts like Maul and Ventress. These individuals became wild cards that the Sith and the Jedi both had to contend with. 3. The Dathomir witches and their resurgence in the era of the First Order. Though much of the Dathomirian culture was destroyed in the wake of the Clone Wars, the dark side influence of the witches would continue to shape the galaxy for generations. The First Order, an organization that arose from the ashes of the Empire, represented a continuation of the Sith's oppressive ideology. Yet it was also influenced by the very chaotic energies that the Dathomir witches had once wielded. In the sequel trilogy, Kylo Ren, a key figure in the First Order, struggles with his legacy as the grandson of Darth Vader, while also feeling the pull of the darkness that runs through his bloodline. Kylo's desire to break free from the Sith's doctrine and his eventual embrace of his own destiny as the leader of the First Order aligns with the concept of breaking free from tradition, a notion that the Dathomir witches embodied with their matriarchal rule and independence from the Sith and Jedi orders. While the witches' direct presence in the galaxy waned during the rise of the First Order, their spiritual teachings of embracing the emotional aspects of the dark side, while seeking freedom from the Jedi and Sith dogma, found resonance in the conflict between Kylo Ren and Rey. Both characters struggled with their personal ties to the Force, Kylo Ren with his inheritance of Sith blood, and Rey with her mysterious connection to the dark side through Palpatine's legacy. The clash of ideologies between Rey and Kylo Ren in the sequel trilogy is not just a fight of light versus dark, but of conflicting Force philosophies. The rigid, dogmatic principles of the Sith and Jedi, and the more free-spirited, instinctual approach to the Force that the Dathomir witches represented. 4. The Dathomir witches' Sith influence in the expanded universe and canon. Though the witches were initially relegated to the expanded universe, their continued presence in new canon media proves their lasting relevance. The rise of new Force-sensitive characters and the resurgence of the Sith and Jedi orders in the aftermath of the original trilogy shows how the Dathomir witches' magic and teachings still permeate the galaxy. The novel Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir, sheds further light on the lingering power of Dathomir's witches in the post-Clone Wars era. This canonical story reveals how Maul's connection to the Night Sisters' magic gives him an edge over the other Sith, even in the face of Darth Sidious's manipulations. In this work, the spirit of Mother Talzin endures, and Maul's use of Dathomir's dark sorcery makes him a central figure in the resurgence of galactic chaos. Additionally, Asajj Ventress, another pivotal character associated with Dathomir, carries the witches' teachings into her own path, even after their near destruction. Her personal evolution, from Sith apprentice to independent Force user, reflects the Dathomirian independence and the witch's unique ability to reject traditional Force structures in favor of a more personal and spiritual connection to the Force. 5. The Dathomir witches' Sith, true legacy. A force of personal power. The ultimate legacy of the Dathomir witches is their embodiment of the idea that personal power can be derived from balance between the light and dark sides of the Force. They didn't subscribe to the strict codes of the Jedi or the Sith. They followed a path that was deeply personal and tied to the natural rhythms of the galaxy. Their philosophy offers an alternative view of the Force, one that embraces emotions and instincts as sources of strength, rather than something to be suppressed or feared. The Dathomir witches represent the freedom of choice in wielding the Force, allowing individuals to shape their own destiny without being trapped by the boundaries set by the Jedi or the Sith. Their use of ritual magic, spiritual connection, and emotion-driven power offers a third way, one where the dark side is not a force of pure destruction, but a tool for personal empowerment and resilience. The witches' legacy of independence, self-determination, and spiritual connection to the Force ensures their continued relevance in the galaxy. They represent the idea that the Force, in its most primal form, is not bound by the rules of Jedi and Sith, but is instead something personal, fluid, and transformative. One, the Dathomir witches and their continuing legacy in new generations. Although the Dathomir witches were decimated during the Clone Wars, their spiritual teachings and magical abilities left a lasting imprint on Force-sensitive individuals in the galaxy. The influence of the Dathomirian path, a mix of emotional mastery and intuitive use of the dark side, can resonate with future generations of Force users, especially those seeking a balance between the light and dark. The resurgence of Force-sensitive individuals, whether through the Sith, Jedi, or unknown new factions, could potentially see the rebirth of the Dathomirian path. As characters like Rey continue their journeys in the post-Empire era, there is potential for a new understanding of the Force to emerge, one influenced by the ancient practices of the Dathomir witches. Rey, for instance, could represent the next step in the evolution of Force users who embrace both light and dark aspects. While she rejects Palpatine's legacy and ultimately chooses the light, her connection to the raw emotions and spiritual connections that the Dathomir witches embodied could shape her own view of the Force. The balance Rey embodies in her battle against the dark side and her acceptance of her own heritage echoes the Dathomirian teachings, embracing the emotional complexities of the Force rather than suppressing them. As more stories unfold in the post-Empire era, new characters might rise who choose to embrace the more unconventional path of the Dathomir witches, blending traditional Jedi or Sith powers with Dathomir's ritualistic magic. These individuals might seek to unlock the full potential of the Force, free from the confines of established orders, thereby reshaping the galaxy's view of how the Force can be wielded. 2. Dathomir witches Sist. Influence on the rise of new Force factions. The rise of new Force-sensitive factions is an area where the legacy of the Dathomir witches could play a significant role. As the galaxy rebuilds after the fall of the Empire and the First Order, there may be groups that reject the traditional teachings of the Jedi and the Sith, seeking alternative methods to understand and wield the Force. The Dathomir witches' blend of ritualistic magic, spiritual connection, and emotion-driven dark side power could inspire a new generation of Force users who embrace freedom and individual power rather than seeking rigid doctrines. These groups may see the Sith and Jedi as flawed, understanding that the Force is inherently complex and requires a balance of emotions, instincts, and spirituality. Given the mysterious and untapped nature of the witches' knowledge, future storylines could explore how Force-sensitive beings find their own paths, influenced by the witches' practices. For instance, new factions might reject the dichotomy between Jedi and Sith, exploring a more holistic and flexible approach to the Force, incorporating elements of both light and dark, while rejecting the extremes of either. One possible direction for this could be the cultivation of a new order, like the Jedi Order, but with a deeper spiritual connection to nature and more freedom in using emotion as a source of strength. These new Force-sensitive individuals might consider the Dathomir witches' approach as part of their quest for balance, a bridge between the rigid structure of Jedi control and the unhinged violence of Sith ambition. 3. The Dathomir witches and their role in understanding the Force's true nature. The philosophical contributions of the Dathomir witches are often overlooked in favor of the well-established Jedi and Sith traditions. However, their understanding of the Force could offer key insights into the true nature of the Force, particularly how it can be used in its purest form. Unlike the Jedi, who often view the Force as a path to maintaining peace, and the Sith, who see it as a means to achieve power and control, the Dathomir witches saw the Force as a living entity that was part of the very fabric of nature, emotion, and spirituality. The natural energy fields that the witches tapped into provide a different view of the Force, one that sees all living things as interconnected. This interconnection with nature is essential to the witches' power. Their rituals and magic were rooted in rituals of connection, whether through their use of rancor beasts, summoning spirits, or connecting with the land itself. They understood that true power did not come from domination or restraint, but from the harmony between oneself and the world around them. This insight into the spiritual nature of the Force could provide future generations of Force-sensitive beings with a deeper understanding of the Force's purpose. If this philosophy is revived in future Star Wars media, it could offer a fresh narrative path that transcends the ancient battle between light and dark, focusing instead on the balance between both aspects, as the witches did. 4. The Dathomir witches and the continuation of their practices. What lies ahead? While many Dathomir witches were lost in the Clone Wars, the potential for their practices to return is vast. Survivors like Maul and Ventress show that the legacy of the witches can live on in unexpected places. Their influence could lead to the resurgence of Dathomir's magic in the hands of new practitioners. In future Star Wars stories, hidden witches or new clans could emerge on Dathomir or in other regions of the galaxy, continuing to explore and cultivate the magic and rituals of their ancestors. It is possible that ancient texts, artifacts, or spiritual beings tied to the witches' power could play a central role in future stories. The continuation of their practices could not only offer a unique Force philosophy, but also shape galactic events, particularly with how these witches approach the Force with a pragmatic view of emotion, power, and balance. Moreover, characters from the previous trilogy, such as Rey, may have encounters with these witches' magical practices. Rey's personal connection to the Force, combined with her desire to rebuild the Jedi Order, could result in her learning from this alternative path. This connection could further explain how Rey balances the Force within herself, blending the traditional teachings of the Jedi with more ancient spiritual methods. 5. The Dathomir witches' Sith legacy in the hands of the new Jedi Order. In the wake of the events of the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy, the galaxy will have to rebuild itself in the aftermath of conflict. The Jedi Order may see a resurgence,